Hello everyone! Today I'm going to talk about what happened with the meta from update 2.0 to 2.8. I'd like to point out that during this period there were many significant changes in the Spiral Abyss. Those who watched the previous video were probably surprised to find Venti in the S rank. He ended up there because at the time both parts of the Spiral Abyss included a lot of small enemies. Everything changed after the release of version 2.0 when a boss appeared for the first time on the 12th floor, although the second part still had small and medium enemies. During these 9 versions, another innovation was added to the Spiral Abyss, namely strict restrictions on elements. Because of this, Venti significantly dropped in the rankings as he became less useful compared to other characters. The Spiral Abyss of version 2.8 was substantially different from 1.6, and the level of strength required to achieve 36 stars increased significantly, though not as much as it will increase in 3.0. The release of version 2.0 caused some excitement among players. The opponents in Inazuma were different from what they are now. The reason is that compared to previous regions, the difficulty has increased manifold, and even very strong teams did not always manage to cope with ordinary robots. This led to a reduction in difficulty in Inazuma shortly thereafter. Version 2.0 added 4 new characters to the game, 2 of whom remain very popular to this day. Let's start with Ayato. She turned out to be a very strong character. Her gameplay at that time was quite unusual. Players of that era were used to the idea that the most powerful teams used Vaporize and Melt, but Ayato introduced the freeze strategy. Popular teams with Ayato at that time looked something like this. Ayato was also interesting because she typically used the Blizzard Strayer and required only a small amount of crit rate. Previously, these artifacts were rarely used on characters. Before Ayaka's release, the only strong Cryo character was Ganyu, who played with the Wanderer's troop set. Ayato dealt significant damage, freeing up the Pyro character for the other Abyss Chamber, and many considered her to be one of the best main damage dealers in the game. Sayu, at the time of her release, was a character that many were looking forward to. However, due to her low utility, she quickly lost relevance and became unpopular. Yoimiya was not initially to everyone's liking. Many were aiming to get Sayu but ended up with the Pyro Archer instead. Players were displeased with Yoimiya's very simple gameplay consisting only of her elemental skill, as her ultimate was and still is considered one of the most useless abilities in the game. A popular team with her consisted of Xingqiu, Bennett, and Kazuha. Also, in this update, a dungeon with very useful artifacts has been released. The Emblem of Severed Fate was used on a large number of support characters who played through Elemental Burst and required a high amount of energy recharge. The Shimenawa's Reminiscence set was a nice bonus because collecting 2 pieces increased attack power. Version 2.1 became one of the most significant and notable updates during the Inazuma era. In this update, 2 heroes were introduced who generated a huge amount of negativity. However, it's worth mentioning first that players could obtain an exclusive character for free in this version. I won't say much about Aloy because both players and developers would prefer to forget about her as an unpleasant experience. Raiden became one of the most discussed and exciting characters in the game. Right after her release, she faced massive criticism due to the ability of her second constellation. The difference in damage between C0 and C2 is about 40 to 45%, which caused dissatisfaction among players. Over time, players came to realize that Raiden at C0 also has its merits. She was an excellent support character, while Raiden at C2 primarily dealt main damage. One of the strongest teams in the game was formed with Raiden, which even got its own name, Raiden National. Additionally, Raiden quickly took the top spot in sales and repeated her success later in update 2.5. When Kokomi first appeared, she also faced strong negativity. Players couldn't understand her purpose. They were also shocked by the negative crit rate value. Subsequently, the situation changed drastically, and Kokomi still holds a very high position in the rankings. Version 2.2 gained significant importance not because of new characters but due to the introduction of new enemies. The Rift Wolves became the first monsters that posed a serious threat to players who played without healing. At that time, shields were valued much higher than healing, but the arrival of the wolves marked the starting point for a gradual re-evaluation of priorities. Version 2.3 introduced players to Ido who typically formed a team only with Geo characters. Previously, Geo characters were rarely used except for Zhongli. However, from this version, Geo received its first main damage dealer. Ido could successfully compete with many teams. A team with Ido mostly consisted of 4 Geo characters and included Zhongli, Goro, and Albedo. Also, this update featured a very interesting event with Albedo's doppelganger. Unfortunately, it was the last event in Dragon Spine. In version 2.4, two very strong support characters were released. Shinhei became indispensable for cryo characters, and players who often used Ayaka and Ganyu were eager to obtain her. At the same time, Yunjin proved to be the best support for characters using normal attacks. Although there were few such characters at the time, she quickly found characters she continues to synergize with to this day. This update also introduced Enkanomiya, which brought a wealth of information about the world of Teyvat through the Byakuyakoku collection books. Version 2.5 of the game introduced Yae Miko, who faced criticism due to a significant damage increase at C4. Players also often compared her to Fischl, finding no significant difference in damage. At the time, the electro element was weak and not popular until the release of Dendro. Nevertheless, many players still wanted to acquire Yae Miko due to her beautiful appearance, charisma, and role in the storyline. Version 2.6 was memorable for several reasons. Firstly, it introduced the chasm with its unusual storyline. Secondly, Ayato made his debut and he was often compared to Tartaglia. A popular team with Ayato usually consisted of Xiangling, Bennett, and a third character. The third slot was often filled by an Anemo character, but Yunjin also fit very well. This update is most remembered by players for Ayaka's extended banner, which shocked players with a message stating that the banner would last 240 days. In the end, the banner lasted over a month, from April 19th to May 31st. From the release of version 2.3, where Ito and Goru debuted, until the end of 2.6, there were no significant changes and no new characters with standout strength were introduced. However, this trend changed with the release of the new version. Update 2.7 introduced two characters. One immediately gained popularity, while the other did so only over time. Yelan turned out to be a very powerful character, serving as a great 5-star alternative to Xingqiu. In comparison, Yelan provided the team with more damage and buffs, while Xingqiu offered defense, moderate healing, resistance to interruption, and at C6 applied more hydro than Yelan. As for Kuki Shinobu, we won't discuss her in this video. At the time of her release, her role was unclear, so we'll discuss her interactions with Dendro in the next video. Version 2.8 caught attention not due to changes in the meta or the release of new characters, but because of an intriguing storyline on the archipelago. This was the last update when it was possible to visit this location, as subsequent summer events took place in other areas. It should be noted that the appearance of Haizu somewhat weakened Sucrose's position because he took some of her teams. Nevertheless, this nuance was insignificant as a new wave of success awaited Sucrose in version 3.0. The power distribution of characters at the end of version 2.8 looked something like this. Overall, the period from version 2.0 to 2.8 could be called a time of change. Players began to actively use various mechanics related to reactions. Numerous teams emerged playing without elemental reactions: Mono, Geo, Pyro, Electro, and Cryo. There was an increase in the number of support characters for different situations who have not lost popularity to this day. This period in Genshin was the most interesting for me. Inazuma is my favorite region. I love the locations and their diversity, the character design, and the overall atmosphere of the region. I am always very happy when the developers create events there and it becomes possible to roam the islands again. Well, that's the end of my story. Thanks for watching. Write comments, subscribe to my channel. It gives me more motivation to make videos more often and make them more interesting. See you soon.